Everybody. Welcome. We've got quite a few of you joining the chat again this morning. Today's webinar will be looking at topics related to cybersecurity for directors and the role of the directors in IT and cybersecurity matters. I'm Monique Bachner. I'm a board member of ILA, and I'll be your host for the next sort of 45 or so minutes. For those who are not members of ILA, ILA is the Institute of Directors in Luxembourg, and it aims to promote best practices in Luxembourg in the field of corporate governance. In the context of COVID-19, ILA has launched this online initiative to help boards identify key topics to be thinking about. And I think you'll all agree that cybersecurity is one that keeps popping up in the news. Today, we are joined by two experts, both very active in both cybersecurity and with boards. First, we have Christophe Bianco. Christophe is based in Luxembourg already since more than 20 years. He's an active in cybersecurity and runs his own cybersecurity services company, which is active in 7 countries with about 120 employees. He's also been quite active in cybersecurity education at ILA, amongst others, but also, for example, being a part-time teacher at Telecom Nancy, and very involved in awareness raising, including with Luxembourg authorities such as C3. Christophe is part of ILA's digital working group and runs ILA's training course, Cybersecurity for Directors. Christophe is joined by Carlos Alberto Silva. Carlos has over 20 years in TMT experience, including M&A and investment across Europe and the rest of the world. He's led several investments globally as an active investor in this area and holds various executive and non-executive board positions in high-growth tech companies, including 2 of the most relevant cybersecurity services players in Europe. So we're very honored to have the 2 of them with us today. So a few house notes for our viewers. So this webinar will take the format of a discussion, just addressing topical issues. You can ask questions through the chat, but please do not unmute yourself. Stay on mute, and if you want to ask questions, use the chat function. We will endeavor to answer those sorry, I've got a few people in the chat here saying there's no sound. Do other people hear me? Okay. Okay, thank you. So use the chat function and we'll try to answer those questions during the seminar or at the end. And if not, we'll try and incorporate them into follow-up sessions or writing that we'll be preparing. So on that note, let's kick off. So we wanted to start with the big picture landscape and just thinking about, what are the threats at the moment? Christophe, there's a lot of news about cybersecurity and the crisis and current times being more and more dangerous and insecure. Do you agree? What do you think about this?
Hi, Monique. I would say yes and no. So if you look from a pure cybersecurity point of view, and when I'm saying that, I'm taking my cybersecurity expert hat, we are not seeing a big change on the trendings. The only things that it's changing for sure, it's all the traditional things that you are receiving under DHL, all these kind of phishing attack are now more concentrated on coronavirus. And so what we are seeing on the market is that there's a huge number of registration on domain name linked to the virus. And of course, why that? Just in order to attract you, and attracting you as one main reason for the malicious guy, to bring you to do something that you're not supposed to do. So clicking on a specific link in order to infect your computer, attract you to install a software that will allow them to remotely take control of your computer, or attracting you to pay or to give money to buy some mask, for example, that you will never, of course, receive. All these kind of malicious things that you are becoming a target because of the current situation. So that's typically what we are seeing. Of course, you can see on the press that some specific healthcare institution or hospital have been targeting by traditional ransomware. But if you look the real volume, we are not seeing a big, huge. It's just a shift because the guys are smart, if I can say that in that way. They know that at the moment you are alone in your home, you are trying to get information. And so you will go on the internet in order to get any kind of information you can. And so, for example, I will not be surprised that we will start to see some fake accounts or fake websites for the end of the contingency, you know, because people want to get information. When will be the date? What will be the target of the region concerned? And all these kind of things. So that's what we are seeing currently on the market. And the key point is that because we are human, we are still doing things that we should avoid to do.
Okay, so you think it's basically the same threats, but perhaps just in, you know, different guises, and so people should just have their same, or maybe a little bit heightened awareness to suspicious emails and, you know, only linking through to trusted contacts and trusted sources.
Yeah, exactly. For example, we are using the Zoom application. So we just discovered that there is a new registration of Zoom domain in order to attract people to download a fake Zoom application. So they are smart in the way that, you know, they understand how to make money. And so, like we used to say, they try to be focused. And the focus currently is you being alone in your own environment, so feeling secure. And so you're looking for information on the corona and all the things links to the virus. What about information? What about solution or news and all these kind of things? So that's why I should say also that the law enforcement are putting a focus on that in order to make sure that the business can continue without that big risk. And in Luxembourg, we have a specific institution called C3, or Security Made in Luxembourg. So they have two websites, Be Safe and Security Made in Luxembourg. They post advice on what you have to do, what you don't have to do. Europol, Interpol have also issued several notes toward the professional like us in order to be more aware. Of course, we have a national target to protect the healthcare institution at the moment. So there is a consortium between several cybersecurity agencies under the governance of the government in order to focus our attention to make sure that they are not impacting by the current situation. But I will say, of course, cyber is always a buzz, and cyber is always using the fear in order to make you doing something. But currently, I will just reinforce what we used to say during the ILA cybersecurity workshop we are doing. Just be skeptical on what you are doing, and don't click anywhere, or don't click in websites that are not legitimate. Don't download software where you should not go because it's not the official website. And in case you don't know, go and ask to someone, you know, because that's the best protection that we can tell you to adults.
Yeah, thank you. Carlos, is this the same that you're seeing? Anything different from your point of view?
Yes, absolutely. So good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. I totally agree with Christophe. So there is in terms of volume, we don't see across all the regions where we are an increased number of attacks, but what's true as well on top of this is that there's a massive shift for remote work. And that means that we need to have extra care on separating home from work. And it's also true that the attack surface is bigger because we have more devices connected, some devices not protected by the typical corporate protections, cybersecurity protections. So there's a growing potential for additional leakages. So that's a concern that we need to have. But as Christophe was saying, typically the attacks happen because of the most basic gaps. So, and Christophe will of course have the opportunity to discuss that, but we need to have the basic concerns around using the platforms and the technologies.
Yeah. So Christophe, do you think that companies have been ready for this massive move to work from home and so many remote and distributed workers? What are the particular issues? Presumably there's maybe some resource issues within firms or bandwidth, or I don't know.
Yeah, so I think that perhaps from us, the main weak point at the current situation, we massively put people working remotely, I will say, without sufficient preparation. So if you take the example of Luxembourg and the financial sector, we used to be not authorized to do remote working, So from one day to another one, asking to put everybody as a remote worker was a very big challenge for the IT guys. And I can tell you that most of our customers spend the first 2 weeks just to make that happening. So what does it mean when you do that? You do not do the traditional cybersecurity monitoring or things like that. Some of them have to accept that people are doing remote working with their own IT devices, which is also an issue because these devices have not been sanitized, I will say, in order to make that. And perhaps the key point is that even on the current time, what we are seeing is that most of the companies are not really prepared to a cybersecurity incident. But now with having everybody remotely connected, I will say that it's even a bigger challenge. So for sure, our concern at the moment will be a company hurting by a cybersecurity incident because we know that it will be a very big challenge to manage that. The second point is the volume. So if you look, for example, we had internally at ILA that discussion regarding Zoom usage, okay? And perhaps for some of you that are using Zoom, you saw in the news that there's a lot of discussion around the security and privacy around Zoom. But for me, that's typically the issue we are facing with the current situation. You have to understand that Zoom have put 200 million of new users on the platform, 200 millions, okay? So they were not prepared for that. So what does it mean, 200 million? From an attacker point of view, that's a huge, interesting surface attacks. So of course, you have 200 million of users on a new platform. Most of them start to discover the features and all these kind of things. That will be an interesting population to go after. But what we have seen also is that security professionals start to look at that application because it was not the hot one or the key ones. And they started to challenge the security of the application, the privacy concept of the application. And we discovered that, of course, there's issues. But I should tell that there's issue in all the application. The only thing is that the volume of action put a lot of focus on that application. And the result is that we discovered that this application was not secure and not prepared for that. And so if you look the comment of the CEO of Zoom 2 days ago, they are stopping to add any kind of new features and they just will work on the security aspect. So for example, we send to all our customers a memo regarding, is it a good thing to use Zoom or not? So for the director of you connected to that session, my advice will be typically on that case, you can still use Zoom for the traditional discussion and traditional ongoing activity. But when it comes to sensitive sharing of information or sensitive topics, we recommend you to switch to other platforms like WebEx, for example, like perhaps Teams, or the one that the company you are working with can propose to you. We are in discussion with several customers that are doing the switch at the moment, but that does not mean that Zoom is insecure if you take the good measure, like does not allow anonymous user to connect to the platform, put a password on the session, just to avoid that people jump in and do what we call the bomb zooming. We discovered that people have developed a small application that just scroll internet in order to find open Zoom session and to jump in, So I will say that's the situation. We were not prepared to have that massive connection, The IT team and the security team focused on making that happening. So now we are starting to see that they come back to the traditional day-to-day operation and to go after the perhaps more secure aspect. But that's the situation. And the other point that perhaps concerns more you as a director is that the nature, the basic nature of the human. You're at home, you feel safe because you are in your room with your computer, and you think that you are invincible. And that's the weakest point we have, because we know that you will do stupid things. And when I say stupid things that normally you will not do in the office, like going to a website and downloading Zoom. You don't know where you are, but you do it. If you are in a session or in the office, you can ask to the IT guys or the security guys. But when you are at home, it's quite difficult to get that support. So that's why I said you have to take more precaution on what you are doing. And if you want to get some information on Corona, whatever, go to official website like BBC or things like that, not the traditional link that your friends share to you, because that's the best way to face issues.
Thank you. That's interesting. I mean, I guess that this Zoom bombing is a little bit like the Facebook parties that the teenagers used to,
exactly,
put their address and their party on internet, and then everybody piles in, including all the people you don't want. So don't post the details publicly online. We have one user in the chat who's mentioned that there's some people who've joined this call by telephone. It's a good point, but this is, I think, where you have to look at your threat model. This chat will be posted on YouTube afterwards. There's no confidential information as such in terms of what we are discussing. If this was a strategy meeting for a highly sensitive industry, then you would maybe take the different approach if you saw some unidentified callers on the line. Also, in this case, everybody has had to register with a email address via the inscription that ILA set up. So, Christophe, obviously a key thing that you said there was also about sufficiency of resources, that an issue is that if companies are dealing with all these new remote workers and new laptops and all sorts of challenges of people who are not used to working from home, that they may not then have the extra bandwidth to detect or deal properly with a cyber attack. What sort of adjustments might be required? Or maybe actually it's even for Carlos, what is the role of the directors in business continuity with the IT setup? How should directors be challenging their companies on their business continuity with relate to the tech and the infrastructure that they have in place?
So what actually my last 4 weeks were basically invested on those efforts. So helping the companies to set up their business continuity plans and making sure that they were appropriate. And so first, the health of the workers were protected, and then the sensitive information was also protected. So you have to bear in mind that I'm mostly at tech companies, so the concern, and they are not digital laggards, I would say, so they typically are on the forefront of the technology adoption. But even though the world changed dramatically in a couple of weeks, so most of the companies were not expecting this, even though they were used to have a part of the workforce working remotely, what we have now is 100% of the people working remotely. So that's where we are. And the concerns are pretty much what Christophe was saying. So it's to have the basic, adopting the basic procedures in order to make sure that we can work on a secure way. The platforms typically, so in my PC, so I'm board member of several companies. In my PC, I have the clients of most of the applications and platforms that Christophe mentioned. So WebEx. I have some applications that I even didn't know before this happening. But that's pretty much it. So then there's a checklist that the company typically circulates in order to make sure that this kind of work, this working mode, is secure. So that's pretty much it.
And on the user end, what are they doing with the users? Are they making sure that there's particular policies and procedures in place? How are they ensuring that the employees and the end users, they actually know what they're allowed to do in this new environment?
So if the question is for me, what I see is, so there's typically the company computer and the company devices, and they tend to be protected. A different thing is when you are an external advisor or consultant, or an external non-executive director, for example, where you use your own devices. So then what should happen is you should have a set of guidelines in order to make sure that that device is protected. So it's updated in terms of patches, which is easier said than done, and has some basic applications in order to make sure that it is protected. But I would say there's a gap there. Okay, so there's the concern is still not on those devices and on that people.
Okay, and you sit on several boards as well, and you mentioned, that some of the things that boards should be doing for following up, and so here would be, for example, perhaps asking about the arrangements and procedures in place. What other things are you doing with your board at the moment related to the crisis generally?
Well, the fundamental work that we are now carrying on is assessing the impact of the crisis on the companies. Okay, so there are two fronts here. So on one side, as investor, so we need to assess what will be the impact on valuations, what will be the impact on our approach. So taking into account new investment opportunities. On the companies we have in the portfolio, on the several companies where I'm seated as a board member. So the biggest concern is what will be the impact on the company. So looking at the macro environment, what sort of recovery we will have. It will be a V curve, a U curve, an L curve, and then what will be the impact if we are talking about a short-term impact on the sales, if we will have a more fundamental impact on the ecosystem where the company operates, and the short-term concern, I would say, is identifying whether or not some companies will need additional capital raises in the next 6 months. But I'm talking about earlier stage companies. So bigger companies are more looking at contingency plans and assessing cash needs. So we have a saying in the startup world that says that free cash flow is not important until it is important. And then when it is important, it's the only thing that is important. And that's the main concern, I would say.
Okay, so it sounds like you're having a lot more contact with your companies at the moment.
I can confirm, Monique.
Definitely. Yeah. And as a board member, I think we play an important role. It's, I would say, helping, but I'm not sure if it is the word, because sometimes it's basically hearing the management teams, sharing their ideas and challenging some of the initiatives that they are putting in place, and also bringing what we see in other geographies and in other companies to that discussion. That typically helps.
Great. And
perhaps, just Monique, because I saw that there's question from a director in that situation, what we have to care of, things like that. I think that what Carlos didn't explain is that they ask us to set up some kind of plan and to maintain that plan, which is in fact just to monitor what is the trend of the situation, because the key question will be how long it will be in that current situation. And it's not only just making sure that we assess properly the current situation, but from an organization point of view, what are the coming next step? And I think that as a director, that's the key question that you have to ask, regarding, okay, you manage the temporary 2 weeks crisis, setting everything, putting everything in place. But now, what is the kind of measure you put in place in order to make sure that we are controlling the security of our remote user? We are taking care about what they are doing with the system. So for example, I can tell you that for the customer, we are monitoring on 24/7. We have reinforced the control on which kind of website they are going after, which kind of volume of activity we are seeing on their platform, in order just to try to detect things like a data breach happening or things like that, because that's the perhaps one of the key situations. That's for the beginning, it's crisis, so we accept to downside a little bit the protection and all these kind of things in order to make sure people work. But after that, we need to take care, because people or the malicious guy knows that you have lower your control. So you need to make sure that we reinforce them, or we perhaps reduce the control but increase the monitoring of the detection. And that's perhaps also something that as a director, being part of some boards, the ELA member should be aware that, okay, things are in place, things are working, but now that's perhaps the beginning also of a new wave of control and follow-up. And that's also a key point.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I guess that it sounds like a lot of companies are coping, reasonably well, given the, at this beginning of the crisis. But directors need to be asking a lot more questions about what is in place and what is and isn't working. And that would probably, I guess, extend to more questions about reliance on third-party providers and what checks are being done on those as well, to make sure the whole chain continues.
And perhaps also to give you a view for example, in Luxembourg, for the systemic banks, the European Central Banks ask a weekly report on the statistic, the measure, the detection, and all these kind of topics in order to make sure that the banks keep focus on monitoring that part. So there's for the regulated people, there's a concern regarding the level of security. And we are Excellium, a controlled entity from the CSSF, and I can tell you that I never had so many connection with the CSSF than now regarding, okay, what have you done? Do you get acceptation from your customer in order to do 100% remote operation? On a weekly basis, they issue a FAQ with a new measure and new recommendation, and their concern is really to make sure that we keep in mind that we need to monitor that and to make sure that operations still continue to run like if it was in the office, I would say.
Christophe, you just mentioned 100% remote operation, and I've understood that some parts of the financial sector, in particular some of the banks, are having issues with that, whether that's CSSF related or actually internal policies or constraints of their systems. Have you been seeing that as well?
Yeah, of course, because let's put that in perspective. Most of the company in Luxembourg, or let's say a significant part of them, has a remote working capability in place for years. But the issue is that normally it was for what, 10% of the population or 5% of the population. And now we have companies that have to put massively people in, if you take the EIB, for example, it's 2,500 people that work remotely with the same environment that they have to have on their current job. So first, the infrastructure were not prepared for some company. Some company, like some private bank, at least they does not authorize that. And so you cannot change that just because of the situation or just because you want. So for example, basic things. In order to allow the people to do remote connection, we need to set up infrastructure. If I order the components, I need 3 weeks to get the box, and so that's just as simple as that. So I can tell you that I was nearly ready to go to the border control custom in Luxembourg in order to get boxes for customer, because they were asking me during the weekend, I need the box on Monday because I need to connect my population. So we have that point. First, we were not secure. The second point, not necessarily the procedure were in place, because we were thinking for remote access just in case we need to do remote support or to do things like that. but currently we have the people working 100% remotely. So they need all the component of the IT system they had when they were in the office. And so some companies still struggle to do that. And I heard that there's a few companies in Luxembourg that just cannot do that. And so they put in place some, or there's a big banks that just put in place a process where only the director are connected. And there's a kind of vacation where employee can connect for 30 minutes just because they cannot do more. So not everybody is at the same stage. So if your company allow you to do that, you are a lucky guy, you know, because that's not what happened to everybody. And you know, we used a joke, and perhaps you saw that, Monique, you know, because at the working group of ILA on digital, it's always interesting to see that there's something flying around LinkedIn and Facebook saying, what is the best sponsor of your digital plan? It's not your IT guys, not your management, it's the COVID, you know. And because with the COVID, from one day to another one, we changed massively our way of doing things. You know,
yeah, I've seen that one. It's quite funny. So I guess the takeaway for the directors is, you know, hear about these different challenges that are happening and find out in your companies, you know, where do they lie on this scale? What are they doing? How have they got it under control? How are they documenting that? And what sort of clear procedures do they have? And I guess also, you know, to find out who is helping the help desk, because it sounds like they're probably overwhelmed.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. And Christophe, so most non-executive directors don't have a help desk, and they don't have a IT department to fall back on. So actually, maybe to Carlos then, you know, plus a lot of NEDs are perhaps less tech savvy than some of the younger employees in the workforce. You know, not all of them, but some are. What would you say, you know, as an independent director, as an independent person, what is your IT setup? You know, how are you organized? Yeah.
Well, let's start with the good news. The good news is that it works, 100% digital, and I've been working 100% digital for some years now, so I was actually prepared for that. And also it's I work with just 3 devices. So you need a PC, you need a tablet, you need a phone. I actually have 2 PCs because one is for home and the other one is for work. So, and I do this very strict separation. And then it pretty much works everything through the applications that we were discussing. So we cannot imagine overcoming this crisis with this massive shift for remote work without internet. So this thing 20 years ago or 30 years ago would be very dramatic. It is dramatic today, but it would be much worse. So and then it's true, you need some digital literacy, I would say. It's also true that there's a lot of pretty much any doubt you have, you can Google it and you have the solution, or you probably have someone related with you, someone close to you with IT knowledge, and most likely he is 12 years old or 15 years old that can help you with most of the things, because this the things are very friendly, the applications are very friendly if you are a digital native. If you are not a digital native, then you need to support yourself with digital natives. And one thing that probably was not as a top concern for the companies, but it will be. So companies will be more and more concerned with the remote work, because remote work, as Christophe was saying, there was a shift to remote work. A lot of companies are now working 100% of remote work. I saw statistics in China, 10% of the people before the crisis used to work to do remote work. The crisis is more or less, so at least the first wave, more or less solved. Now 40% of the people are still working on remote work. And I see that happening also in Europe and in the US. So the companies will be more concerned. The companies will ask Christophe and experts like Christophe help on that, platforms, and that the companies also need to support external people that collaborate with the companies. But it's very simple, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps Monique.
You mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because we have always that kind of question during the cybersecurity ILA workshop, and I saw that also on the chat. If you are a non-IT guys, and what are the typical key measures that you have to adopt? I will say, if you're not an IT guy, we will not change that in one day, you know. So you have to accept that, and unfortunately, you have to live with that. But if we can give some advice to the people on the call, I think we can summarize that in a very limited number of one. First, you are using application for which quite often you have to put a user and password. So I just remember everybody that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not a good password, you know. So first, if you focus on taking care of your password, that will solve the life of a lot of things, you know, because that's always a weak point. We just made an assessment 2 weeks ago to a company. We have been able to break 86% of the password of the company. So it means that there is an issue. So a good password is what? A password that you change on a regular basis. Also, what does it mean on a regular basis? Let's say every month on a traditional way, but perhaps with the current time, perhaps every 2 weeks could be a good habit. A good password is not an easy guessable password, you know, so a name, that of birth and all this kind of thing, because that information, you put that on social networks, so we can find them. So you have to, let's say, a password could be a good password if you put some exclamation mark at the beginning or at the end, perhaps replace the E with a 3 or this kind of subterfuge. A good password is a password that you are not using for the all application you are connecting to. I know that there's a massive amount of people that are using the same password on all the websites. What does it mean? If someone breaks a password, they will use it, and it will be the same for all the application, that you put all the application in danger. If you're not a little bit more IT guys, you can perhaps use a password vault on your computer. So it's a kind of vault that stores the password that you have. You don't necessarily know the password, but you know the key to open the vault. And every time you are going to an application, the vault will pop up and say, do you want to use the password in the vault? So password is a key one. The second one, you need to have an antivirus. Okay, so what does it mean having an antivirus? It's not just buying the antivirus, okay, and installing it. It's making sure that it's updating on a daily basis. So updated on a daily basis means every day you will go to internet, download the database of new viruses, and running on your computer. And perhaps the last point, don't install application that you don't know or that you don't trust the website where you are downloading them. That's why Carlos mentioned that he's splitting the business computer from the personal computer, because, for example, my children is doing school from home now, and of course she's going to install small application that the teacher found in order to read or do some exercise. But sometimes you cannot trust the website where you are going to take that application, or perhaps you are looking for games that you don't want to pay, or these kind of things. For sure, that's an insecure world where you can get that kind of thing. So first, make sure of the source of the application that you're installing on your laptop. Secondly, make sure you have an antivirus running. And third, use a password, which is a password. It means something that you can make sure that you can trust and that not everybody can know. Perhaps for the more touchy parts, I mean the duties of a director, where you have to join boards, where you have to perhaps sign documents and or share sensitive documents. I will say, if you're not a native IT people, I will perhaps recommend you to use a tablet, because the good things with a tablet is that the storing of the local computer is limited and the weaknesses are limited. So for example, if you have an iPad, it's quite easy to maintain the iPad up to date with the patches and all these kind of things, because it's automatic. The point is, try to avoid to forward the sensitive document you are manipulating for the board between your personal mailbox and another mailbox to have it on your iPad or whatever. You know, that's sensitive documents. So consult them, manage them, and when you don't need them anymore, remove that, you know, or suppress that. Or if you have some company has a kind of board application in order to manage all this kind of thing, just make sure that you let them store in that application, because there is some protection in that application. But what we are seeing is quite often when you send document to yourself or to other people, for example, you forget to go to your sent folder in the messagery, and so we have a copy of that document. So the day you are facing an issue, or the day you resell your computer, or perhaps when you change your hard drive because of an issue, that document leak. So that's kind of things that I will say for non-IT director, the basic things that you have to consider. And as Carlos said, if you don't know, we will provide you some links after the session. But for example, if you're in France and that you think that you're facing a cyber attack or something like that, there's a platform managed by the government called Cybermalveillance. In Luxembourg, we have also Be Safe, which is also operated by the government. That's kind of platform where you can send your request and have some advice and assistance when it comes to cyber incidents.
Christophe, we have a couple of questions there about both what antivirus products might be recommended, but also you touched on about documents and storage and sharing. So maybe you can also touch on encryption and VPNs and the need for those, or how they help.
Yeah. So perhaps let's speak about, you know, because that's also an ongoing question. What is the best antivirus on the planet? I will say the best antivirus on the planet is the one that you update on a regular basis. Okay. Whatever is free or commercial or whatever, of course, if it's commercial, you have an hotline or perhaps you have a support line. Sorry, but there's free antivirus on internet that you can trust. I would say my best recommendation, let's do a Google like antivirus evaluation, look at one of them and select the one that you feel more sensible to. You know, most of the antivirus, they do the basic antivirus things, but they have additional function like password vault or remote access protection or cookies protection. So it depends. If you're an IT friendly guys, look in details. If you're a basic user like my wife, I should say, you know, take a free one. There's several one available. Go to the official website to download it. Don't download it to any kind of website, and make sure that you have activated update on a regular basis the antivirus database. That's the first part. Regarding the encryption, I will say there's two things when it comes to encryption. There's the encryption of the data that you store on your laptop, and there's the encryption between your laptop and the remote system that you are using. At the moment, I should say that as there are a few chance that someone steal your laptop because it's at home, I will be not so concerned by the encryption of your laptop. And if you didn't did that already, that's not the good moment to encrypt your laptop, because if you made a wrong operation, that means that you have not anymore an IT device with you. When it comes to sharing or transferring data, normally your company or the company you are working with provided to you VPN capability. So for the non-IT speaking people, VPN means that you have created a pipe between you and the company you are connecting to, which is secure in the way that normally nobody can see inside the tunnel and nobody can intercept the data you are sharing. So that's a good point to do that, you know, and to make sure that if you have to share a document, instead of using the mail system, perhaps it's better to set up the VPN and after to connect the file drive of the company or the file drive that you get access to in order to use the documents. Some company are populated teams, you know, from Microsoft in order to have a collaborative platform. That's integrated also encryption capability. So that should give you enough capability, I will say, to stay safe. But perhaps the key point is that if the data you are sharing are sensitive, don't use Gmail or personal email address. Stay connected to the corporate ones. And if you don't have a corporate one, perhaps the basic things is to just zip or the file and put a password in it in order to make sure that not everybody can open it when they receive the document. For some company and for some operation, perhaps you will be required to use what we call two-factor authentication. So it's the concept of having a user password, but also something that is changing on a regular basis, like the LuxTrust token. This kind of protection is, of course, welcome in the current time because it will force or it will allow you to have perhaps a weak password. But because of that temporary credential, you can be sure that if someone don't have the token you have or don't have the mobile phone that you have in order to generate that PIN code, they cannot get in. But unfortunately, if it's not in place, that's not the good time to set up that, because that's a recommendation we are giving to all of our customers. It's when you do things in a hurry that you make a lot of mistakes. And security in cyber is also quite often related to things not done properly that create an issue or create a door for malicious people to get in, And so that's what Carlos said. If you have to do something, perhaps find a friend that can assist you to make that.
Thank you. Carlos, as a non-executive director, what can you add to that? What have you personally adopted in terms of personal security and procedures or security for protecting, your board documents? You're on mute.
Yes, just realized that. Sorry for that. So I didn't actually do anything in particular, but you have to bear in mind that I've been doing remote work for several years now, and also remote board meetings. So there was a question around, is it possible to do remote board meetings? That's something that we are doing for several years now because we have companies I'm a board member in the US, several companies in Israel, companies around Europe, and sometimes I used to travel a lot. So in a long time ago, so 4 weeks ago, but now we do everything remote, and actually when everyone is remote, it's easier because there's no preferred treatment for the local ones, for the ones that are on the meeting room. But in terms of caution and concerns, I think Christophe did an excellent job highlighting and listing all the concerns that we need to do. So for the ones that are not used to do remote board meetings, for example, and exchange of documents, because even before this, we were already sharing sensitive information through email, through shared files. So that's nothing new on that. What's new now is that you need to work remotely and using a platform like Zoom. So that's the really new thing, and for that you need to do the basic procedures that Christophe very well highlighted.
Just perhaps Monique, to complement what Carlos said, because I saw that there's a director asking question regarding what is the law, what is the exception at the moment. Perhaps we can refer them to the last week web coffee where that points were discussed and mentioned with the different ILA contributors.
Yeah, and on that point as well, there's some notes on the ILA website. But the short answer is that most articles will allow you to have remote meetings. And anyhow, at the moment, there is, an emergency law, which even if you don't have in your articles, you can do remote meetings. And that extends also with that emergency law to shareholder meetings.
Okay.
But there's resources on the ILA website, and in the investment fund seminar we did last week, we went into a bit more detail.
So perhaps, Monique, because I'm seeing Laurent's question about Slack. So let me be clear, perhaps, on all this kind of platform. So we have issued for our customer a kind of recommendation guide. So perhaps I will share that so we can publish that on the ILA website. But you have to think that all the instant messaging application, what about its Slack? What about its WhatsApp? What about its, let's say, I don't know, many of them I'm using on a daily operation. We cannot guarantee that they are 100% secure. So if you are using that to share sensitive documents, I will recommend you to ask twice to the people who ask you to share on that support. Do you put in place the necessary measure to guarantee that it's secure or not? The key point is that there are applications hosted in the cloud, quite often in the US. So depending on the area you're working with, if the secrecy of the affairs or things like that are a concern, that's not a good fix. On the opposite side, I'm also seeing people say, hey guys, this is a free new application that you can install, or this is a new very secure application that you can install. That's not a good idea also, because, you know, I'm seeing that my student currently use something called Discord or something like that. That seems to be the nice new, let's say, WebEx application for the young students. Okay, but we don't know that application. So like Zoom, I'm not sure that a lot of people are put an eye on it from a security and privacy point of view. I saw also that there's a new application that got some kind of popularity at the moment for doing drinks party or things like that, you know. Same again. If it's for the director operation, I will say, let's just use things for which you have guaranteed that it's secure. So if you're an independent and you don't have that question, that answer, ask it. You know, why are you asking me to share that documents? Why you are sharing that by mail? And if you are forced to do that, share the document and after remove it when people have used it. Don't let trace, because that's perhaps, let's say in 2 months that we will discover that there's an issue in WhatsApp or in Slack. And due to that, people have been able to get access to all the information. I have to tell you also that, you know, we are time to time involved in forensic investigation for customer. The last session, the last case we have to manage was to prove that one people was not the first to read a message on WhatsApp, okay? And even if WhatsApp is encrypted, even if it's secure, if it's point-to-point, we have been able to break the WhatsApp, look at the logs, and demonstrate that the people in question was effectively not the first one to read the document. So that's kind of things, you know, you have to think about its communication platform, its software. It could have vulnerabilities, so you have to play that. And perhaps the last point, because I'm used to say that to the youngest people, but perhaps that's a good moment to raise the awareness to everybody. We have also an application which will cost a snapshot, okay, that perhaps you know, that perhaps your children got, which is an application who said normally you take a picture, you share a picture, and in 10 seconds, the picture disappears. So I can tell you, being an IT guy, nothing disappears when it's done digitally. So take care about what you're doing with this kind of things also. And I will say, do in the virtual or in the digital world what you used to do in the physical one. Take care about where you put the document, take care who can get access to that, take care about the communication means that you are using, and take care to who you are speaking to. And if you have doubt, as I say, you will find the link for the platform when you can ask a question on, when you can raise suspicion about, guys, I'm not sure about that. For example, at the moment, you can receive some call from Microsoft or people seeing their Microsoft in order to ask you to install or to review the setup of your computer in order to speed up things. Okay, that does not exist. There is no free lunch, so there is no people free of charge that are coming to assist you. So if they do that, perhaps they will help you, but for sure they will do something else with your computer, because the target of malicious people, we can summarize that in 2 things. Or they want to get access to your electronic identity, so your credential, user and password, because with that, they can get access to your system in order to get access to your data, or perhaps to make action under your name. And the second aspect is that they want to get access to your computer. Because if I want to make an attack on internet, I will not use mine, I will use. So you have to have the basic protection, basic antivirus, and up-to-date component. If you do that, you will get already a good level of protection. And there is so many insecure devices on internet that people will go to another one if they want to make that happening and to have an easy access to vulnerable computers.
Yeah, thank you. So we're running out of time. I have one last question for Carlos because it's in the chat, but just very quickly. You sit on quite a few companies and you're active in cybersecurity investments. What trends are you seeing there?
So if you ask me about the trends in cybersecurity as an industry, what we have to say is that cyber is virus resistant. So meaning that whenever happens a crisis, then new opportunities come for the attackers, for the malicious people, and even for some nation states. And it's true that what we see is a short-term impact on the sales across the world. So the US, they actually were not anticipating that such an impact. So beginning of March, we were having discussions and they were looking at Europe like if here was the end of the world and there they were protected. So it's not like that anymore. But what we see is companies will need to continue to protect themselves. To protect themselves, they will continue to need the services, the products, the solutions. And so fundamentally, the industry trends that we are seeing are very solid. There are sectors, so telecoms, there are sectors more defensive than others. So telecoms as well, what we see is, so I'm also exposed to that sector. And what we see there is actually an increasing demand. And we all feel that probably using the internet from our homes, we see some failures every now and then. And we have to fight for the resource with our kids, so not allowing them to play Fortnite when we need to work. And there are sectors, tech sectors even, that are very, very impacted. But it has to do with the kind of vertical that they serve. And if they are exposed to fashion, brick and mortar, they have a problem. So just to mention one.
Okay, thank you. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and big thank you for Christophe and Carlos for everything that they have shared with us.
It was a pleasure.
I think it was really a valuable discussion into various IT and cybersecurity challenges for boards, overseeing their companies, and for directors as individuals. ILA will post this chat online shortly, and in the next days we will also post a summary of the discussions as well as various links to guides and other resources that will help you. We did the poll. I put it up on screen a little while ago. There seems to be demand for the training course to be run online, so we'll look into that. Obviously, any legal or regulatory consequences of breaches or IT failures could, lead to sanctions or liabilities, or even worse, to failure of the business overall. So please make sure that you are looking into best practices and using proper cyber hygiene, and use your common sense and be extra alert. As Christophe said, there's Be Safe, where you can have a look at their website as well and do reporting if you have a particular issue. Next week, ILA will be discussing board leadership in times of crisis. We have Luc Frieden and Karin Faipo joining us. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel to send them via the Google form on the ILA website, or just reach out to the ILA staff. So take care and stay safe. And I hope that you found this morning's sessions beneficial. Thanks again to Christophe and Carlos. Bye.
Thanks, Monique. Bye.
Bye.